He had intelligence. Rock and roll doesn't necessarily need the whole battery of drums, you know. It's got to do with when to not hit, you know. Silence. If I wonder, where's he? What do you got if you're making music? Silence is your canvas. Charlie Watts was more than just the drummer for the Rolling Stones. He was the band's backbone, a steady presence in a group defined by chaos. His death on August 24, 2021, at age 80, left a void that could never be filled. Watts was known for his reserved personality, his deep love for jazz, and his unwavering dedication to the band. For Keith Richards, the loss was deeply personal. Their relationship went beyond the music, built on decades of trust, humor, and mutual respect. A brief biography. You had another job in tune advertising. Yeah. So why did you get involved with drumming as well? No, I was a drummer as well. I was out of work, and I did more drumming than I did work. I mean, for years I looked upon drumming as part-time until it took over. Charlie Watts was born June 2, 1941, in London, England. His childhood was shaped by post-war Britain, where music became both an escape and an obsession. Watts captivated him from an early age with drummers like Max Roach, Elvin Jones, and Kenny Clarke, leaving a lasting impression. Unlike many of his rock contemporaries, Watts never set out to be a rock star. His heart was in jazz, and his early musical experiences reflected that passion. His first professional gigs were with jazz and R&B bands in London's underground scene. While working as a graphic designer by day, he played music at night, balancing his artistic pursuits with his growing reputation as a skilled drummer. In 1963, he was approached by a group of young musicians looking for a drummer: Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, and Brian Jones. Watts was hesitant at first. He saw the Rolling Stones as a scrappy blues band with little future, but after some convincing, he joined, and his presence immediately transformed their sound. Unlike his bandmates, Watts never seemed interested in fame or excess. He married Shirley Ann Shepherd in 1964 and remained loyal to her throughout his life. While Jagger and Richards became known for their wild antics, Watts preferred a quieter existence. He was often seen sketching during downtime on tour, and his love of jazz never faded. Over the years, he formed several jazz ensembles, recording and performing outside of the Rolling Stones when time allowed. His drumming was unique. He played with an unmatched sense of rhythm, never overpowering the music, but always driving it forward. His minimalist approach made him one of rock's most respected drummers, admired for what he didn't play as much as what he did. For nearly 60 years, he remained the heartbeat of the Stones, providing consistency in a band known for chaos. The deep bond between Keith and Charlie. Keith Richards and Charlie Watts shared a connection beyond music. While the Stones were often defined by the chemistry between Richards and Mick Jagger, it was Watts who anchored the band musically and personally. Richards frequently described Watts as the rock that kept everything steady, a drummer who never sought the spotlight but was always in complete control. Their relationship was built on mutual respect, trust, and an unspoken understanding that defined their decades together. Musically, Watts was the perfect drummer for Richards's loose, riff-driven guitar style. Unlike many drummers who relied on heavy fills or flashy technique, Watts played with restraint, given the Rolling Stones their signature groove. Richards often said that Watts's ability to stay locked into the rhythm allowed him to play guitar the way he wanted. Without that foundation, the band's sound wouldn't have worked. Their unshakable groove became the backbone of songs like Honky Tonk Women, Brown Sugar, and Jumpin' Jack Flash. Offstage, their friendship was built on humor and an understanding of each other's quirks. Watts, known for his quiet and reserved demeanor, had a sharp wit that could cut through any situation. Richards, wild and unpredictable, seemed to delight in Watts's deadpan humor. Despite their differences, they balanced each other. Watts was one of the few people who could call Richards out without hesitation, and Richards respected him for it. One of the most famous stories about their relationship involved an incident in the 1980s when Jagger, in a moment of arrogance, referred to Watts as "my drummer." Watts, offended by the remark, reportedly got dressed in a suit, walked to Jagger's hotel room, and punched him in the face, saying, "I'm not your drummer, you're my singer." Richards recounted this story many times, always with admiration for Watts's quiet authority. It was moments like these that showed the unique bond they shared, one built on deep trust and an unspoken agreement that the Rolling Stones worked because of Watts's steady presence. For Richards, Watts wasn't just a drummer. He was a brother, a steady force in a world that often spun out of control. Their bond was one of the few constants in the unpredictable history of the Rolling Stones. Keith's reflections on Charlie's passing. Charlie's death on August 24, 2021, was a devastating blow to the Rolling Stones, but for Keith, it was deeper. Watts had been a constant in his life for nearly 6 decades. In interviews following Watts's passing, Richards struggled to put his grief into words. He described it as a feeling of being unmoored, as if the foundation of everything he knew had been shaken. He admitted that he still spoke to Watts in his head, a sign of how deeply ingrained their connection was. Richards's first public tribute was simple but poignant. Shortly after Watts's death, he posted a photograph of a closed drum kit with a sign ringing "closed" hanging over it. The image said more than words could. It captured the finality of Watts's absence and the space he left behind. Richards later opened up about how difficult it was to process the loss, calling Watts the coolest guy I ever met, and saying that the band had lost its heartbeat. One of the hardest parts for Richards was moving forward without Watts by his side. The Rolling Stones had always been a band that pushed forward through any hardship, but this was different. It was the first time that they had to continue without the one member who had never wavered. Richards admitted that even with a new drummer, the band would never be the same. Despite the grief, he found ways to keep Watts's presence alive. He spoke about him often, recalling their countless years together with both sadness and admiration. He shared memories of Watts's humor, his impeccable sense of style, and his love for jazz. More than anything, Richards made it clear that Watts wasn't just a part of his past, he was still with him in spirit, in music, and in the rhythm of every song the Rolling Stones played. The impact of Charlie Watts's death on the Stones was the passing. Charlie's passing marked a turning point for the Rolling Stones. He'd been the band's rhythmic backbone since 1963, providing the steady pulse that allowed their music to thrive. Without him, the group faced an uncertain future. While they decided to continue performing, the absence of Watts was impossible to ignore. Before Keith Richards, losing Watts was not just about losing a drummer, it was losing a brother, a trusted companion, and the person who kept the band grounded through decades of highs and lows. Richards acknowledged that carrying on without Watts felt strange. He described it as stepping into uncharted territory, as Watts had always been the one constant in the ever-changing world of the Stones. The band decided to continue their tour with Steve Jordan, a longtime collaborator, who had Watts's blessing to take over in the event that he couldn't perform. Richards, despite his deep sense of loss, believed that Watts would have wanted them to keep going. But even with Jordan behind the kit, Richards admitted that no one could truly replace Watts. The other members of the Stones shared their own reflections. Mick Jagger described Watts as the heart of the band, someone who was not only a brilliant musician, but also a dear friend. Ronnie Wood spoke about Watts's quiet strength, recalling how he never sought attention but commanded respect with his presence. Each of them felt the weight of his absence, and while they continued making music, it was clear that the dynamic had shifted. For Richards, Watts's influence could still be felt in every performance. He often spoke about how he could hear Watts in his head while playing, as if his drumming still guided him. The Stones had always been a band that pushed forward, But this time, they were doing so with the memory of Watts driving them rather than his physical presence. It was a reminder that some losses can never be fully healed, only carried forward. Now it's time to hear from you. What's your favorite Stones song? Let us know in the comments section below.